Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll try and get the mic the right distance from my mouth before I start. It's obviously amazing to see so many of you here for Skipper's Briefing, and obviously because there are so many of you here, it is a bit of a squeeze. But what I will do is try and be as brief as possible and only cover anything that I feel is relevant that you might not have picked up on in the sailing instructions. But obviously that's the very boring part, and I know that you're not actually here to listen to me or listen to bits about the sailing instructions. You're here to listen to the weather briefing. I know it's been very difficult, and there's been lots of comment on the weather over the last few days, over even probably the last week. So without further ado, I will pass over to Penny Tranter from the British Met Office, who will talk you through some likely weather scenarios for the coming week.
Thanks very much, Nick, and good afternoon. Like August has been so far this year across the UK, we're going to see some rather changeable weather as we go through this week. And hopefully the presentation is going to show. Okay, so if we start off with the start tomorrow, if I can get it to stay there. What we're looking at is some very light and variable winds in the morning. And as we go through the morning, we're likely to see sea breezes developing. But the sea breezes through the afternoon are going to remain light, force 3 or less. So we'll have a smooth sea, and the weather's going to be pretty much as it is outside at the moment, although we may see a little bit more sunshine, and the visibility will remain good. So the reason for such light and variable winds is because at midnight or 0100 tomorrow morning, we're going to have an area of high pressure centred off northwest France. And as we go through tomorrow morning, heading towards tomorrow lunchtime, the centre of that high will push up towards East Anglia. I hope you can all see this. And across the UK, we've only got 1 or 2 isobars, which is indicative of incredibly light winds. We do have an area of low pressure down across northwest France, but that's not going to influence the weather for the start or those fronts that you can also see around that low. So as we head towards 1100 tomorrow, I hope you can see this at the back, but because we've got the area of high pressure very, very close to us, we're going to see very variable winds indeed. And the barbs there that you can see in white are force 1 or less. Pale yellow is force 2, and the brighter yellow is force 3. Exactly, there isn't any. So at 1100, all we've got is force 2 or less, and we have got variable winds. But what we are starting to see along the south coast is just a sea breeze starting to trickle in. If we move on to midday, we can start to see that sea breeze a little bit more in evidence. But again, it's still force 2 or less for us here at Cowes and also in the Western Solent and out across Christchurch Bay. Moving on to 1300, we can see a little bit more of a sea breeze coming up the Western Solent and a south to southwesterly across Christchurch Bay, across to island of Portland. But again, we're still looking at a force 2 or less. But for the sharp-sighted, you might just be able to see that there is a yellow there. And so it's indicative of that we might see up to 10 knots at 1300. So by the time we get to 1400, we're starting to see the sea breeze just picking up a little bit more along the coast towards Portland Bill there. And it's force 2 or force 3 for many places there. By the time we get to 1500, we can see that it's swung round a little bit more towards the west. So you've got a west-southwesterly across Weymouth Bay and across Christchurch Bay as well. Okay, so before I head away from the start, are there any questions that anybody would like to ask of that part? No? Okay, I'll head on then. So as you would expect with those very, very light winds, it's going to be a smooth sea state. Looking further ahead then until the end of Wednesday, what we have in terms of the weather pattern is that we're going to continue to see that slack ridge of high pressure across the Western Channel into the Celtic Sea. But the centre of that ridge of high pressure is going to change around, so we are going to see the wind direction changing in direction. What we have then on Wednesday is that there is an Atlantic low, not particularly deep, trying to come in from the west. And it's not got very much energy on it. So it's not going to give us very strong winds, but it will definitely influence the wind direction and also the wind speed. So we're probably looking at it getting up to around about a force 4 or 5, perhaps touching a force 6, depending on where you are at that stage. So for the first 36 to 48 hours, around that ridge of high pressure, the winds are going to remain light and variable, but depending on how close to the coast you are, you may see some sea breezes. Then as we head in towards Wednesday, as that weakening weather front comes in from the Atlantic, we'll see southerly to south-southwesterly winds ahead of it. And then as the weather front crosses you, the winds will veer, swing round to become more west, even west-northwest during the latter part of Wednesday. As I say, we're not expecting those winds to go above a force 5 or force 6. As you would expect, the sea state with those light winds is going to remain smooth or slight, may get up to moderate out in the Celtic Sea, and then you could see occasionally rough towards the Fastnet rock with those stronger winds on Wednesday. So for the ridge of high pressure, you're going to see a lot of fair weather, but as that weakening front comes in from the west, we could see some rain, and that could just sort of lower the visibility down to moderate at times. Okay, so this is 1800 tomorrow, and what we have is that as we go westwards towards the Lizard Point and Land's End, you can see that the winds start to back round towards the south and still remaining force 3 or less. As we head towards 2100 on Sunday, we've still got very light and variable winds, and we start to see them coming in more from the southeast towards Land's End there. So what are we looking at for Monday then? Well, we've obviously still got our ridge of high pressure. That's still going to ensure mainly light and variable winds, but if you are close to the coast, we are going to see sea breezes developing, and the winds are likely to stay force 3 or less. So we'll have a smooth sea, still some fair weather, and the visibility generally going to be staying good. So there's just confirmation of our smooth or slight seas at first thing on Monday morning. So first thing on Monday morning, just past midnight, we have got the wind, as I say, a little bit more variable, coming in from the north to northwest, right towards Land's End. Out across the Celtic Sea, you can see that it's now going round towards the south, and still very light indeed. And that process continues as we go through the early hours of Monday morning. If anything, we start to see it picking up to a southerly force 3 across the Celtic Sea by 0700 on Monday. And we see a similar process by the time we get to 10 o'clock on Monday. So this is our forecast weather chart for Monday at 1 p.m. We've still got hardly any isobars on the chart, but you may just be able to see this nose of high pressure coming in from the southwest. And we've got this very, very weak weather front across Ireland. So that's just going to keep our seas sort of slight, possibly moderate, up towards Fastnet Rock. So with the ridge of high pressure coming in from the southwest, on its western flank, we'll have winds coming in from sort of mainly between the southeast and the southwest, but again, they're going to be very variable. If you're closer to Land's End, then the winds are going to be more coming in from the north. And that process continues as we go through Monday afternoon. You can see that the change in the wind direction is more in the centre of the Celtic Sea. And we start to see by Monday evening the southwesterly drift just pushing a little bit further eastwards across the Celtic Sea. and that continues latterly into Monday evening as well. So what do we have for Tuesday? Well, again, we've still got very slack pressure across the Celtic Sea, looking at variable light winds, also sea breezes if you are still near the coast. But as that weakening weather front starts to approach from the west, we will start to see the winds just picking up a notch, perhaps up to sort of force 3, occasionally a force 4 later. The weather's generally good, and visibility will stay generally good as well. And there's just confirmation of the state of the sea. Generally, it's going to be slight. So by the time we get to the early hours of Tuesday morning, you can start to see that we've still got this northerly here on the eastern side of the Celtic Sea down towards Land's End. It's still about a force 3 or less. And we've got the southwesterly coming in across the western side. As we go through Tuesday morning, we see that there's very little change, not much change in speed. And by the time we get through to the middle part of the day, we can start to see the sort of weakening weather front coming in from the west. So still slight conditions across the Celtic Sea. So as that nose of high pressure starts to push eastwards, we still see the winds coming in from between the south and the southwest, still generally around about force 3 or less, but just starting to pick up to force 4 in parts of the southern Celtic Sea later on. So Wednesday then, we're starting to see that weakening front coming in towards Ireland. The winds are going to be generally coming in from the south to southwest, force 3 to 4, but increasing force 4 to 6 right ahead of that weather front. And once that weather front has crossed you, then you'll find the winds veering or turning to the right, becoming more west to northwesterly, force 3 to 5, may just touch force 6. So obviously we have the weather conditions which tie in with the weather front crossing your area, going to be cloudy with some rain at times, and the visibility may just drop in that rain. So we might see slight or moderate seas. And here, first thing on Wednesday then, we can see that we've got a southerly, mainly across the Celtic Sea. Across the south coast of southwest England, it's more of a northerly. But we're starting to see the wind picking up here to around about force 4 to force 5. And those strengthening winds push across the Celtic Sea during the morning. So on Wednesday lunchtime then, there's our very weak weather front over Western Ireland. The isobar's a little bit tighter ahead of it, indicating those stronger, mainly southerly winds. And also the state of the sea getting up to sort of moderate for more parts of the Celtic Sea. Now, as we go through Wednesday lunchtime then, here is the area of stronger winds, mainly southerly, and we can see that they're up to a force 5, getting up to a force 6 here. And by lunchtime, of course, this is a forecast at Fastnet Rock, we're just starting to see the winds veer round more to sort of west-northwesterly. And as that front moves eastwards, we can see those west to northwesterly winds following in behind. But always the strongest of the winds on this weakening weather front are likely ahead of the front, as we see a sort of mainly south to southwesterly, force 4 to force 6. And because of the strengthening winds, we can expect moderate seas. So going on beyond Thursday then to next weekend, the weather pattern is becoming more changeable. We started to see that process happening on Wednesday. And for Thursday and Friday, it looks as though we're going to have lower pressure to the northwest of the UK and the north of the UK, and higher pressure to the south. And with that, we'll have a mainly southwest to northwest wind flow across the Celtic Sea and around the southwest peninsula. But just to flag up, really, I'm not going to, this is a forecast, so it could completely change. I have to put that caveat in. Next weekend, some of the weather models are indicating the risk of a deeper Atlantic low. So we could see some very interesting winds and weather with that. So, of course, it's one that we will be keeping a very close eye on. So for Thursday and Friday then, we're looking at the winds being mainly between the south and the northwest, depending on what weather fronts cross the area. And as I say, for next weekend, with the model, one or two of the models just indicating some really quite unsettled weather, we could see some quite windy conditions. And obviously that will be reflected in the sea state as well, where we could see some rough or even some very rough seas. So the weather during Thursday and Friday, a lot of dry weather around, but also some bands of rain coming through. And then for the weekend, we could see some heavier rain if you're still out at sea. And obviously the visibility could drop down to sort of poor or moderate in that heavier rain. Just to summarise, and also to highlight the uncertainties in this forecast, because as we all know, it may change. So for the start then, we're looking at light and variable winds with sea breezes developing, staying at force 3 or less. Then during the race, the first 48 hours or so, because we got that slack ridge of high pressure, which centre's going to be moving around, we are going to see variable wind directions, and it is going to be quite light, as well as sea breezes developing near coast, so force 3 or less. And then we see it starting to change as we head through Wednesday. We got that weakening Atlantic low and the weakening weather fronts coming in. So the wind's picking up ahead of that during Wednesday, mainly from between the south and the southwest, then veering west to northwest as that front crosses you. And as I say, for the weekend, it's looking a little bit, looking rather more unsettled, but it's a long way off. And of course, the sea state will reflect those winds that you can anticipate. Okay, so that finishes my session. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Sorry, hello. Any idea of first light or last light during the period?
Sorry,
Sunrise, sunset.
Sunrise and sunset. That's a really good question, and I can't answer you off the top of my head. Is there anybody in the audience that can answer this gentleman's question? Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
If it's very light during that high pressure?
Yes, it is possible that you will find pockets where it is just calm. I mean, that was showing up on the forecast wind fields. So, yeah. Yes, so the answer to that. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'll hand you back to Nick.
Thank you, Penny. I will now endeavour to run through this as quickly as possible. Just a few points I'd like to raise. And again, at the end, I'm quite happy to take questions, and hopefully, if possible, I can answer them. Otherwise, I will go away and find the answer and try and get it back to you all. The first point is just that I hope you've all either received by email or come and collected the amendment number 1 to the sailing instructions. It clarified a few things. We originally thought we would have to use 22 at the start of the race, but we can use channel 28, which means we can be consistent at the beginning and the end, which hopefully will make life easier for you all. And then there was also a clarification of the description of the buoys at the start of the race, and that was that the Rolex buoys will be in place as the inner and outer distance marks. There was a third one, which was just the ordering of the Cowes waterfront obstruction, and that we put in a nicer order for you to be able to put into your plotting devices. We have 3 gate boats at the start of the race to try and make it quick and easy for you to pass through those tomorrow morning with your storm sails up. There will be a few boats out there, the class boats, particularly the maxi catamarans and the Amoca 60s, class 40s, that where you don't have a trysail for class rules, you just put your deepest reef in your main, and you put up your storm jib. There obviously, we've just seen the weather briefing, there may be late crew changes. If you are removing crew from your crew list, that is those of you with more than 2 already. That is why we ask you to text through your final crew number to us with a list of any of the names of the people you've taken off. So in case you haven't managed to get on the crew management system and remove them via that way, which you obviously are able to do, you can just text the names of the crew that aren't on board. This service will not allow you to add further crew. You actually have to add them properly through the crew management system. So you may sail with less as long as you tell us with that text message in the morning, but you cannot sail with more than you have declared before the start of the race. Everyone text to confirm the number on board in the morning. Just because we've changed the buoys and obviously given you the description of them, it's just to clarify that the buoys are there for the inner and outer distance marks on the start line. They are not the starting line and maybe just off the starting line. The line is the transit as described in the sailing instructions. We will try and help you if it's a nice sunny day, which it appears it will be tomorrow. There may be a fair few spectators on the water. So there will be some wrought ribs on the water flying M flags, and they will endeavour, where they can, to guide boats away from each end of the start line at the start. And you'll have noticed from our obstruction and sort of exclusion zone along Cowes waterfront that we will endeavour to get boats safely off the starting line in and out of the Medina without affecting boats starting. So please be aware of that obstruction. Which moves me on to KMS Buoy. Somehow we managed to bury the position of KMS Buoy in the sailing instructions, which you leave to port on the way out, and it forms the end of the obstruction. The position, as I've put it on the screen, is in the sailing instructions. It's listed as part of the obstruction, but I can see some confusion where it wasn't listed in the course. So it's up on the screen now, and it is in the sailing instructions in the list of obstructions for you to put into your routing software. Then the rest of the course is fairly simple and straightforward, exactly the same as 2 years ago for many of you that did it, except if you did it in a multi-hull. To remove an area that was highlighted as a potential for boats meeting at high speed in opposite directions, which was between Bishop's Rock and the southern TSS, the multi-hulls will go round to the south of the TSS on the way home. So if you're in a multi-hull, please make sure that you have the right course, which is in the sailing instructions in your routing software. The finish line, obviously, is the western end of the Plymouth Breakwater as normal. And just a reminder that all the TSS that you encounter on the course, going out and back, are obstructions, and there are penalties for entering into any of those. There are a few trophies for rounding the rock. So unfortunately we don't have race officers in the lighthouse anymore. So we do ask you to take your own times as you go around. The instructions are in the sailing instructions. And please text them through to us or email them through after you've rounded or when you return into range if you're using your mobile phones. That will be fine. We will be confirming rounding times using the YB tracker as well. Just a slide on the finish line. This is purely to highlight that the Queen's Ground buoy is a significant distance from the line. So as you pass the Queen's Ground buoy, you haven't actually finished. And if it's very, very light, the tide's against you, sometimes people can get slightly confused, and it's really painful to turn on the engine just a wee bit early to get in. So please note the bearing of the line and ensure that you make it right through the line before you take your sails down and turn your motors on. We have our normal way for you, obviously, with so many of you in the race. There are going to be many, many people following the race. So please point them at our website. All the tracking will be on there and the various means of following the race. Also, the media team keep reminding me to tell everyone, please tell us about your race. This time, there might be plenty of time for you to tell us all about how beautiful, hot and sunny it is out there during the race. And please remind, obviously, any friends or family following you that the trackers aren't 100% perfect. They are very, very good nowadays. But if it doesn't report for a while, they're more than welcome to ring the race office. We will hopefully have an idea where you are. We may well have asked you to report in your position on a regular basis. And so we will be able to help friends and family following the race and reassure them that there isn't a problem. The yellow bricks will be updating every 15 minutes. When you arrive in Plymouth, we're back at the Plymouth Yacht Haven. The race office is open 24 hours. More importantly, the crew bar is open 24 hours. There will be a 24-hour ferry service running between the Barbican, the QAB Marina and the Plymouth Yacht Haven. We appreciate that where we are on the Plymouth Yacht Haven side, accommodation is very, very limited, but there is plenty on the other side, and we will endeavour to get you backwards and forwards to that as smoothly as possible. So that ferry will run night and day. In the village, we will also have the press office, and you can meet the Rolex team as well, and obviously collect your polo shirts for completing the race. The last point on this slide is the prize giving. 1,800 on Friday, the 22nd. So we hope you're all there. We do hope that we're not being too optimistic, and that hopefully the weather forecast is slightly pessimistic, and that you will make for a nice, quick race. But we are aiming to celebrate our 90th anniversary, and hopefully the majority, if not all of you, can be in and at that prize giving. Oh, sorry, 21st. I will leave. There's the numbers up on the slide. So if any of you haven't got the race office contacts for Plymouth, they are on there. They're also in your sailing instructions, of course. But I'm quite happy to take any questions now, if anyone has any. I appreciate it's quite hot in here at the moment.
Can you confirm, unlike other years, there's no spreader mark after the rock this year?
No, we will use the Fastnet TSS as the spreader. So the whole of the Fastnet TSS and the rock will be left to port.
Yeah, we didn't get any tracker instructions in our pack. Do we have to activate them in any way?
No, if you've collected your tracker, we'll have turned it on in the office. Any of you that have picked them up this afternoon may not find yourself instantly appearing on the player because they're only reporting over this afternoon and tonight every 4 hours. So within the next 3 to 4 hours, you should find that you're on the tracker and it should be reporting fine. If not, YB will actually contact you directly, or they might arrive on a rib if there's a real problem with the tracker to swap it out for you.
Positive acknowledgement going through the gate in the morning. What would that be? Nod of a head? Wave?
Yes, they will wave and say okay as you go through as much as they possibly can.
So we have to be pretty close.
Yes, please pass in a nice orderly fashion quite close to the gate boat.
Okay, thank you.
The gate boats are open 2 hours before the start, so please don't try and rush out 5 minutes before your start line and expect to be able to jump the queue and go through. Please give plenty of time to get through. They do generally have quite a line of boats approaching them. Well, unless anyone else has any questions, I wish you a fantastic sail, and I hope... Oh, sorry, there is a question over there.
Just concerning the return from the rock for monohulls, we have to leave the Isles of Scilly with the 8 nautical mile zone, and then you have the TSS just southern of it. Is it allowed to go in between because it's about 0.5 miles? or do we just leave it all?
No,
to the
sorry,
course?
that is a very good question. The 8 mile zone is purely to designate any of the rocks. I don't believe there are any rocks in that passageway more than about 2 miles from that rock. So you can use that whole distance. It is, if there is a rock that dries within that, that is considered an outlying rock. So if you draw a circle round, all the rocks that form a point in that circle, they are part of the Scilly Isles. So that's, sorry if it's a confusing description, but no, you can use the full inshore passage as long as you pass south of Bishop's Rock.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic sail, and we'll see you in Plymouth.